Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back after our little Easter break, myself and Seb Jones, for the League One podcast from the lower league. Look, a nice week off, Seb, but happy to be back. Lots and lots of football to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the whole of the Easter break to chat about, as well as another game of fixtures as well from last Saturday. So certainly lots to delve into. But yeah, nice to just take a bit of time out of things. I went to Northumberland with a family for a week, so it was nice to go up that end of the country and different sort of atmosphere. Really, different sort
Yeah,
of
nice and
world up.
quiet.
Absolutely different sort of world up there. But now jumping back into reality. But yeah, nice to have the time off. What about yourself? Are you glad to be back? Glad to have time off? Bit of both.
I'm glad to be back. I know it's good. I've not really been away from the football. Lots of football over the holidays. It's a real shame we can't talk about Donny Rovers on our League One podcast at least this season. But we're flying. Beat Wrexham last week. I was there for that, so it's been a nice. That was probably the highlight of the week off was beating Wrexham. So that was nice.
Good stuff. Yeah. Before we start as well, this is a change of background for me. I'm normally in my house at uni, but I'm still in my Easter break, unlike yourself, Jamie. So I'm in the study in the family home for the time being. But don't worry, next week we'll be back to the usual scene. The big bounce of sea on the wall, but yeah, that'll be back next week. So just for all those wondering why the change, I've not suddenly had my room all nicely redone. I'm a student after all. But well,
All the audio listeners will be going, "What is he talking about?
He's got background." Well, yeah. For context, for those on the audio, I'm not in my usual position, and probably the last 30 seconds I've just said made no sense to you at all. But from here on in, it all will. So let's go.
That's exactly it. Well, we'll start before we jump into to League One. Like you said, lots to talk about. We'll talk first about the Bristol Street Motors Trophy, Johnston Paint. I still refer to it as.
Yeah, JPT.
Yeah, that's it. Peterborough United, obviously winning that on Sunday, 2-1 against Wickham. They seem to save everything until the last 5 or 6 minutes, and there's a real flurry of goals at the end. And I believe the stat was, I was listening to it on TalkSport, that Peterborough haven't lost at Wembley, either the old Wembley or the new Wembley, and they haven't lost there. So a Bristol Street Motors Trophy for Peterborough. Did you manage to catch any of the games, Seb?
Yeah, I caught some of it, to be fair. Although I have to be honest, and I did switch over before the goals were scored to watch the Man U Liverpool game. So I didn't actually see the goals live. I have subsequently seen them, but I did watch the majority of the game. It was pretty even, to be fair. Both sides had a couple of chances, but Peterborough, on top and rightly so, as you said. They're unbeaten in Wembley and a second JPT in 10 years. I think they won it in 2014 as well. So good for them. Yeah. Good for them to hopefully spur them on in the push for a playoff place. But yeah, they're good spectacle for both sides, really. Wickham, I thought passed it well. Peterborough attacked it well through the wingers that we spoke about so often on here. Mason Clark and Poku as well. Both shining on the Harrow turf at Wembley. But yeah, good game. Did you catch a little bit of it?
We had it on the radio, as I say. It was when you mentioned I'm back at uni. It was on my way back. We had a little bit on the radio. It did sound a very interesting game, actually. The goals, Harrison Burrows scored a brace, 85th minute, and that cross, was it a cross? Was it a shot in the 91st minute?
Well, you take it, don't you? Whatever it is, you take it.
Well, that's it. And Dale Taylor scored in between those two. So 6 minutes and 3 goals. So they saved everything right to the end. A mate of mine is a Peterborough fan. He's not really shut up about it. It was I managed. I looked up and on his laptop he was just scrolling through pictures of Darren Ferguson. So
I bet he was loving it.
If he's listening to this, I'm sure he'll get a laugh out of that. But a good win for Peterborough.
Yeah, and good for Burrows as well. I think he was in the crowd last time Peterborough were there in 2014, and last time they won as well.
Yeah, I keep plugging TalkSport. We're not sponsored by them, but I think
not at all.
One of the other stats they brought up was I think he's been with Peterborough since he was 6.
Wow.
So a nice story there, isn't it? It's like a childhood Peterborough fan. And scoring the winning goals at Wembley.
And captain the side as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet he was on cloud 9.
Yeah, 100%. And to turn it into a League One stance. Do you think? Well, we will talk about that actually in the second half. About the running, who we think is going to finish where. Do you think it could be good for them in terms of pushing them on? They are, Ivan Navigate, with the games in hand, they can reach the automatics. They'll only be a couple of points behind if they win their games in hand. It's not out of the question. Do you think this is the sort of spur that can spur them on? Do you think a big win at Wembley?
Yeah, massively. I think confidence for anyone who wins at Wembley just sort of increases massively. I've got to get my Barnes hat on and say in 2016 we won the then JPT, and that properly spurred us on to go and push. We managed to sneak into sixth, but we got the momentum from winning at Wembley. We've got the fan base behind us, and that basically that team spirit and that determination around the club, I think, got us that playoff spot really, and ultimately then we won Millwall in the final. So based on my own experience, definitely it can definitely help them. Winning at Wembley is a massive boost, and they'll be hoping that they can replicate that again for the playoff final. But as you said, even that, they're not too far off the top two spaces. Whether that win alone can sort of push them to the top two, I'm not quite sure. It'll certainly give them some motivation and some sort of galvanisation and some extra fight within their challenging, really. I think had Wickham won it, it wouldn't done that much. It wouldn't change that much for the season in terms of where Wickham are in the league table. We know they're not going to get relegated. We know they're not going to get promoted. It'd just been a sort of something nice to cap off a sort of mediocre season, if you like, for Wickham. Whereas for Peterborough, they can definitely use it as a springboard platform.
Definitely. And the team they're chasing, Derby, didn't play actually on the weekend. I'm assuming that is because they would have been playing either Wickham or Peterborough in the league. It has meant that all the games are sort of evened out at the top anyway. The top three have all played 42 games, Peterborough, obviously, with those 2 games in hand. But we're a little bit more even now. Only a few games in hand, sort of up and down the table. Everyone within 1 or 2 of each other. So we're getting a good picture now coming to the end of the season. We'll talk about the run-in at the other side of our half-time sort of break. We'll talk about the playoffs, the relegation, who's going to win the title, shock, Portsmouth, and the relegation, obviously.
You meant to tease it, Jamie. You meant to tease it.
The automatics as well, as we mentioned a little bit. We'll get talking about that a little bit more after the break. But before we get there, we'll have a look at some of the games from Saturday. You mentioned Barnsley. Why don't we start there? I'm sure you'd be delighted to talk about this one.
Do we have to?
A 2-1 defeat to Charlton, and Alfie May brace for them. Nathan Jones's side, another win. And you watched this one on iFollow, didn't you, Seb? So what did you make of it?
I did, yeah. I thought, to be fair, the first half wasn't too bad for either side, really. Both sides had chances, had opportunities. Charlton took the lead really through an Alfie May free kick, which I think is sort of being applauded around social media. But for me, there's a gap in the Barnsley wall, and Alfie May does what Alfie May does, and he's seen the gap and he's taken it, and it's more or less a straight shot at goal. So it's a bit sloppy really. And then the second May goal is a good curling finish. In fairness, he's the League One's top goal scorer for a reason. So he's given an opportunity in a sort of a tight space in the box, and he's killed it into the corner. Barnsley got one penalty, possibly could have got another as well. Devante Cole was brought down. Just one of those days. Nothing was really clicking for the Reds really, and our great away form comes to an end. I think that's only our second away defeat all season, so not great really, especially. Given the recent results, I think it's only 11 points from 8 games, something like that. It's not good at this moment in time, and I think we were pretty confident going into it that we were playing away from home, where we have been better so far this season, but wasn't to be, unfortunately. But yeah, fair play to Charlton. They came with a plan, and they won. I think they got 3 points.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Only their second away defeat in the league. It's been 7 games for Barnes. You mentioned a little bit that patchy form. They haven't won back-to-back games in their last 7, which I guess isn't sort of a damning stat, but top 5, top 6, you want to be winning a lot more consistently than that. The gap now from the automatics is 8 points do have a game in hand, though it is worth mentioning. They are sort of safely in the playoffs. They are how far from Lincoln? 6 points. So they're sort of 6 points above falling out of the playoffs and 8 points off the automatic. So it's very much a position where you'll be in the playoffs, and I guess it's about if you're going to get who you're going to play in the playoffs, isn't it? If you're going to finish 3rd or 4th or 5th, maybe even 6th.
Yeah, well, just based on what you said, I'd be incredibly surprised if we did drop out of the top 6. It sounds really harsh. We probably do deserve to drop out of the top 6, given our form. But with how it stands at the moment, I would be incredibly surprised.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we've just got to solidify our playoff spot. I don't really see us pushing for that top two. I think there's too much too much points in it, really. But it is about who we're going to face. What I don't want to do, I messaged you this during the week. I don't want to face Lincoln at any point during the playoff run. But I imagine, should we get there, that we may end up facing them at Wembley because if they do make the playoff, then they'll sneak into 6th rather than climb to where Barnsley are in 5th. But it's sort of a case. I think Stan would play Peterborough. Barnsley 5th, Peterborough 4th. Same points, but Peterborough have 6 more goal difference. So, and as I mentioned before, they've just come off the back of a Wembley win, and no doubt that'll give them some sort of motivation and galvanisation, definitely. So it's more about who we're going to play. Ideally, I won't play any of those in the top 4 because Barnsley have been beaten by them all at some point this season. So.
You want to play someone outside of the playoffs, is that?
Yeah, but obviously that's not how it works. So, I'd play Derby.
I understand your point. It's not easy, is it? Obviously there's going to be 4 really good teams in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And it's not luck, isn't it? It's just if you have to turn up for 1-2 games, don't you? That is to get to the final. So
we beat Derby, so I'll play them, but they're not in the top 6. So, disappointing.
Speaking of teams, speaking of teams you've beaten, in that last 7 I mentioned, the only 2 teams you've beaten are Carlisle, who are confirmed now to be relegated, and Burton, who do sit in that bottom 4. So you've got in your next few games Stevenage and Portsmouth both away. So it's sort of the time now you need to be picking up points to keep touch with the automatics, but just keep pace in the playoffs, really.
Yeah. Well, what we don't want to do is we don't want to end up slipping out. I don't think we will, but there's always a chance, especially with a couple of teams that are fighting for that last spot. We've spoke about Lincoln and Oxford as well. Blackpool, there's still a chance as well, although they are 6 points off things as things currently stand. But we want to go into the playoffs with good form and with sort of good momentum about us, and we don't want to lose before we go into the playoff running, really. We want to stay as positive as possible, but with the results, as you pointed out, it's not been great. Losing to Cambridge, losing to Burton in the process, it's not a good look, really. Losing heavily to Lincoln as well. I know Lincoln are a good side, but it's not been great so far. So, things probably need to turn around.
Definitely. It's all about momentum, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
we will keep our powder dry in terms of who's going to get into the playoffs. But you mentioned a couple of teams there, Oxford and Lincoln. We're going to talk about their games. Oxford first, then they won 4-0 away at Burton Albion. Before we talk about the game itself, I've got a question to pose to you. I saw an interview post-match. Martin Patterson, the manager of Burton, I think there's only 4 or 5 games obviously left. Burton have got 4 games left in the season. He was asked by BBC Radio Derby if he has thought about leaving and letting someone else take over for the last 4 games in an attempt to keep them in the league. In context, 10 games without victory, 2 points they've picked up out of their last possible 30. What do you make of that, though? It seems to me very late on to be making a managerial switch, something that there's not enough time for it to make an impact. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's calling for a Neil Warnock-esque scenario, isn't it, really? Someone to come in and literally save them. I get why the question was asked, particularly given that Burton have actually played one more game than the teams around them. So I do get why the question was asked. However, I also don't get why the question was asked.
No, I
It's a little
understand.
bit
Yeah, yeah.
silly. Do you know what I mean? Like 4 games to go.
I think it was
Why
some.
would a
There
new
had
manager
been
come
some.
in?
I'm not an expert in it, but there had been some sort of talk around it, and it was obvious. I think it was asked off the back of something being brought up about it. So it does. I think I understand why it was asked. It's one of those questions that they get asked, don't they? But
Yeah, yeah,
it is a weird time to be sacking a manager. I do agree with your point there
yeah,
of it just being so late on in the season.
yeah. And I think he's obviously not had the full season as boss. So maybe some of his players aren't his players. Maybe he's not had the chance to fully implement his playing style. So maybe they just need to be patient and stick with him, whether that means dropping down to League Two. As much as the club probably don't want that in terms of the future, maybe that is best really. So he's got another season to fully implement. He's got a full pre-season under his. He will have a full season under his belt. The club will be under his full management from the off. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think there was some criticism in that interview about the fans as well. Um,
Mm.
I think I saw a little bit of it. So I think it's all not toxic, but I guess it's a bit futile really because of the position that Burton are in. At the moment, they are occupying that final relegation spot. Although that being said, they are level with Port Vale, who are just avoiding the bottom 4. So I get it. I get why the questions are being asked, but sort of logistically, it absolutely been nonsensical to replace manager with 4 games to go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd agree with that. If they do get relegated, it'd be the first time they drop into League Two since 2015 when they were promoted into League One. They obviously spent a couple of seasons in the Championship as well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
2016 through to 2018. So it would be a drop down that I guess has been coming in a way since they came back down into League One. They finished 9th, 12th, 16th twice, and last season 15th. So it's been a downwards and a mid-table trajectory. But this year, obviously, a lot worse in terms of a Burton's perspective. On the manager, Patterson himself, 16 games in charge. He's only won 3, he's drawn 3, lost 10, and 19%
It's
win
not good,
rate.
is it?
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
just not good enough,
not
is it?
good. Not good record. Yeah,
Not at all. And we will talk about the games they've got to come again in the second half. But the other team fighting in that game, the winners, Oxford 4-0, they're back into the playoffs. It's Des Buckingham's first back-to-back wins as manager, and they're now 4 games unbeaten. They're ticking into some good form at exactly the right time, aren't they?
they are absolutely there. It's Mark Harris as well with 2 of the goals from Oxford's 4. The main striker, number 9. That's 13 goals now for the season in the Oxford side. But yeah,
And he scored
they
2 last week as well. They've won 4-0 back-to-back.
absolutely well, perfect. Yeah, great. We spoke earlier. Great. You need momentum and
Yeah.
you need to just be keeping winning games to be pushing, and that's exactly what Oxford are doing. So yeah, a great win for Oxford really. Murphy and Henry with the other 2 goals, and yeah, see, as you said, seals them into 6th place. Whether they can hang on, I don't know. Lincoln are just 2 points away from them on the toes, really, in terms of the league ranking. But they've done well to get into 6th. We spoke, if we go right back to the start of the season, they were sort of high flyers, and they've done well to stay in sort of that top 6, 7, 8 remit. After dropping out a little bit, but sort of clawed themselves back into it. So they've done well to get 6th, and I'm sure they're pretty happy with how things stand at the moment as well.
Yeah, no, it's been a good run for them. They, apart from that awful result at Bolton, they've won 4, of their last 6 to draw in the other one. That result against Bolton lost 5-0. Since then, they've only conceded 1 goal in the 4 games, won 2-0, and then a 1-1 draw at Shrewsbury before those big 4-0 wins in 2 consecutive games. They're playing really good football. Obviously, you look at that, you can't be playing bad football to be scoring 4 goals in 2 games in a row. And Burton aren't an awful side, and they're one of those that they can be difficult to break down. And that's a characteristic that we've seen at Lincoln. They've beat Lincoln a couple of times these past 2 years. They were one of only 2 teams that won at the LNER Stadium against Lincoln last year, and they beat them as well, I think, this season in what was Mark Kennedy's last game in charge. they're one of those. They're just a really sort of sturdy, hard to break down team at times.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Oxford doing very well there, putting 4 past them.
Yeah, Burton have been around a while in terms of League One, but maybe this year's their year. But yeah, Barnsley played them a few weeks ago, and Burton got the no, they didn't. Burton did well to try and get the win, but
it was 2
2-1 Barnsley in the end. 3-1 Barnsley even. They turned it around,
Oh,
but they battled well in that first half. Did Burton? So I like you were saying, I wouldn't be surprised to see teams struggle to break them down. But yeah, Oxford do what Oxford do really. Back-to-back wins for Buckingham and solid position to find themselves.
Yeah. Well, we've skirted around the edges a little bit. We'll move to Lincoln now, and it's 15 games unbeaten for Michael Scabala's side. A draw, though, if you can believe it. They 5 wins in a row. They dropped a couple of points, but unbeaten still.
I know. I sent you a text over the weekend, didn't I? I was like, "What's happening? What's happening at Lincoln? They haven't won. Having been on sort of such a mammoth form of late, really. Didn't win at the weekend. But Reading, a little bit like Burton. Reading are a good side. They have a couple of good individual players as well, despite their off-field situation at the moment. But yeah, I think it's a solid point away from home for Lincoln. Although it does drop them out of the playoff. So in terms of the bigger picture, although it's only 2 points, they are away from the playoff rankings as things stand. But nevertheless, it's a solid point away from home. Reading are a good side. I think Reading will be happy with the point as well, given the fact that sort of Lincoln have gone and battered sides in recent weeks. For Reading to draw level with probably the informed side of the division. I think that the Royals should be happy.
Yeah, I've always thought of it a bit like Burton in a way. I had a bit of respect for Reading. They got a 1-1 draw at Lincoln just before Christmas when Lincoln were in just totally different form, when they were really struggling as opposed to now where they're flying high. But they're a really capable team. And obviously Ruben Seller's great manager with Southampton, obviously, just last season. A draw, as we mentioned, those 5 wins on the bounce, it's turned into a draw with this one. Just 4 games to go in the season. And the matter of it is, it's as soon as you drop a couple of points out of the playoffs straight away, they're down to 7th now. Remains in their hands, though, because Oxford and Lincoln play in a couple of weeks. So it does remain...
That'll be a good game, that.
Exactly. It does remain that it's in both of their hands in a way, even though Lincoln are a couple of points behind Oxford. Now, I was at a different game. I was at a non-league game, actually, with Lincoln United in the FA Vars semi-finals. And the sort of what we were hearing from Lincoln City was that it was they were second best. Everything I've sort of heard coming out of it and the stats I've looked at and that sort of thing was that Reading were actually the better team.
That's a little bit unlike Lincoln of late.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Yeah.
Definitely. Well, the Leyton Orient one was an interesting one on Good Friday. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk about that while we were on our little Easter break, but they didn't play that well. It was a very even game. Leyton Orient probably the better team, as Michael Scabala said himself actually after the game, but Lincoln got that late winner with Jovan Makama. So it's one of those where they've not played well and still won in this game, not played that well and got a draw. So it shows a good, in a way, that they're, even if they're not playing well, still churning out results, churning out points. And the momentum is still there, isn't it? Ethan Orahan back from his suspension, and they look a bit... they are still the informed team in the league, really. It's only a point. They've not... It's panic stations just yet, not quite there. Because a point isn't bad away from home at who can be a bit of a banana skin.
Yeah, and a point is better than none, really. Yes, Lincoln would have liked the 3 points, but as you said, they weren't quite at their best, weren't quite at the races. So I think based on that, they'll have been very happy to... well, maybe not very happy. They'll have been happy with the point. Yeah, content with the point. Yeah, but not. Yeah, they wouldn't be sort of running around the streets anyway.
Yeah.
We've got a point at Reading, but yeah, they'd have been content.
Definitely. So we'll move on to Portsmouth Shrewsbury. That's the last game we're going to go sort of more in depth on Before we get there, the other results: Blackpool with a 1-0 win against Cambridge, Bolton 2-0 over at Bristol Rovers. We've talked about a couple there with Charlton, Barnsley, and so on. Exeter with a 1-0 win against Stevenage. Maybe that puts an end to Stevenage's hopes of the playoffs, doesn't it? They are
Yeah,
now,
I think so. Yeah.
a quick glance at the table, 6 points off the playoffs with Blackpool and Lincoln in the way.
Yeah.
Obviously not mathematically out of it, 4 games to go, 6 points to make up.
No,
and they
I
do
think
play Oxford between now and the end
yeah.
of the season.
I think that is it, which is a shame, really, because they were sort of the
Is it?
underdogs for most of the season. But I think
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think it is
They
a
play
no,
an
it is
interesting style of football in that level
yeah.
in League One. There's not many teams that play the Steve Evans sort of style, so it is a breath
And
of fresh air sometimes.
they have sort of been the underdogs as well. Only just coming up from League Two in the summer, so they're sort of the overachievers, really. But yeah, they've done well, and credit to them. But I do think that is a playoff campaign done and dusted.
Yeah. Leyton Orient, they won 3-1 against Cheltenham. I think their playoff run, also like Stevenage, is over, but a nice win for them there. And Wigan Port Vale was 0-0.
I'm not quite sure Sam will be happy with that. Sam on
Well,
the
they're further behind the North
well,
Port
yeah.
Vale. Sam, to pull back the curtain a little bit, helped us with a little bit of technical difficulties before
He
the
did.
podcast. So all great things to say about Sam. And I met him actually when Leyton Orient played Lincoln on Good Friday. It's him over, obviously, with Callum on the preview podcast on a Thursday. Probably not happy that I've written them off out of playoffs, but I think he'll understand.
He'll get it. He'll get it.
The other game was Carlisle 0, Northampton 2. Which that has condemned Carlisle to relegation. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth when we get to talking about the teams going up and down in the second half. Before we get there, then, Portsmouth 3-1 win against Shrewsbury, an own goal, a penalty, and just a regular goal. But they've won 3-1 and 8 points clear. They are now 15 games unbeaten at the very top of League One. They're sort of charging towards that title, aren't they, sir?
Absolutely, yeah. They'll do it. I think in the end, they just keep on going, just grinding out results. Really, now 8 points clear, as you said, and I think if they win the next match, then that's them. I think it's
they need 5 points.
Them.
I think we worked it out. They need 5 points. So a win and 2 draws or 2 wins would secure title.
Yeah, and I think they'll do it. I think they'll absolutely. There's no reason. There might be a couple of blips, but I think they'll definitely do it.
Yeah, looks fairly straightforward as you look through the stats and everything from this game. Better XG, better possession, more big chances, and a 3-1 win for Messinio's team. So we will go now to a very quick break and then come back in the second half to talk who's going to win the league, Portsmouth, who's going to get automatics, who's going to get playoffs, and who might drop out of League One. So we are back for the second half of our podcast here at the Lower League Look. We talked about Portsmouth a little bit before the break. We'll carry on that now. As you said yourself there, Seb, the title seems to be theirs, doesn't it? They're pretty much over the line. Need very little, 5 points, as we said, and they play between now and the end of the season. It's not an easy run in Bolton, Barnsley, Wigan, and Lincoln. You imagine they'll beat Wigan, and then if they can pick up a couple of points from those other games, assuming that Derby or Bolton win all of their games, then they'll be home and dry. So what do you make of that? Some difficult fixtures, but if any team's going to do it, it's Portsmouth, isn't it?
Yeah, I hadn't quite realised who they had to face. I knew they had to face Barnsley, but I didn't know the other sides. Yeah, I still think they'll do it. I mentioned before the break they might take a couple of knocks in doing so. Might drop a few points here and there, but I think based on the season as a whole, there's no other club really in the league that probably deserves the title. So it'd all be right, really, for them to do that. They'll definitely be tested in the last few games before the season closes. But yeah, they'll manage it. They'll manage it. in terms of sort of the teams that you mentioned, they're all fighting for something except Wigan, really.
Mm,
So that's probably the only guaranteed win. I'd say.
yeah.
The other teams are certainly fighting for um, various things within the table. But yeah, I think Portsmouth will definitely have enough. Yeah, and so so the fixtures are not favourable, but they'll be fine and get through it.
Yeah, I can go along with that. I think it's pretty much an assurance, isn't it, that Portsmouth will get themselves over the line and win what would be a really deserved title, actually. They've had a very good season, fought through a lot of injuries, and remained the best team in the division throughout. Only lost 4 games all season. Quite impressive, really, isn't it? Simple as that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who's chasing them, though? Obviously, Derby and Bolton. Peterborough as well. We'll mention that a little bit. But Derby on 82 points. Really, you sort of imagine just trying to secure that automatics place. They've got Wickham, Leyton Orient, Cambridge, and the already relegated Carlisle between now and the end of the season. As for Bolton on 81 points, they've got Portsmouth, as we mentioned, Shrewsbury, Port Vale, who are fighting relegation themselves, and Peterborough on the final day. Um, they're the run-ins in terms of Bolton and Derby. Worth mentioning before we sort of make our guess of who we think is going to get that second spot is Peterborough. They are 8 points off second, but a couple of games in hand. They will play in their 6 games between now and the end of the season. Port Vale, Oxford, Fleetwood, Bristol Rovers, Cheltenham, and then, as we mentioned, obviously Bolton on the final day of the season. I think the games in hand are Port Vale and Cheltenham, I believe. So some really
Yeah.
difficult fixtures for both teams, but some really interesting ones. Who do you reckon is going to make that final automatics place?
Well, I was gonna say that Derby, I think have got the easier running, but um, Bolton have got some not easy teams because I hate saying that
Easier.
team.
You can't.
Yeah,
There's no such thing as an easy game, as every manager in the
no.
league will remind you.
Well, yeah, sort of one of the many cliches that all the managers say.
Any team
But
can win at this level. Blah, blah, blah.
yeah, all load of rubbish in it, you know. Um, I I think both teams have got a good balance in terms of opposition teams that they are playing. Like I said, Peterborough playing Bolton, but then likes of Derby are playing the already relegated Carlisle on the last day of season. So there's a little bit of mix in terms of league table status, in terms of where opposition teams are. For me, I don't know. Well, at the minute, there's only 1 point in it, and both teams have played the same amount of games as things stand, and there's only 2 goals in it in terms of goal difference that separate the two sides. I think that I don't think Peterborough will catch him. So I'm going to rule out Peterborough.
Yeah, no,
But
I'll jump on that. And they play on Wednesday night against Port Vale, which isn't an easy game. Port Vale obviously fighting for their life to stay in the division. And you've got to imagine there'll be something coming out of Wembley that there'll be a little bit of a blip because they've been celebrating a win, a title win, a cup. No matter what you think of the Bristol Street Motors Trophy, the EFL or whatever, it's a competition that has a final at Wembley at the end of the day. And you've got to imagine there'll be something, a couple of days worth of celebrations, and it might be difficult against a team like Port Vale who need points as well. I can't see Peterborough winning 6 games between now and the end of the season, which is what they need to do, really, if they do want to get that automatic spot. And if you were
I
going to
agree.
make me
Yeah.
guess, I know it's the easy one to say. Obviously, they're in second, but Derby's got an easier running than Bolton. They've got obviously that 1 point advantage, and I just think they're the better team. I don't see Derby slipping up enough for Bolton to overtake them. I'm sure that can be clipped and sent back to me when it doesn't happen. But I'm going for Derby. Seb, do you agree? Do you disagree?
Well, you've just summarised in about 30 seconds what I've tried to waffle and tried to yeah, I'm trying to. I've tried to big it up a little bit in about 2 minutes more than I should have done. Yeah, I think it will be Derby. I think Derby. As much as I don't want to, because Barnes have beaten Derby at home this season. I think Derby. In terms of the quality of their squad, in terms of the consistency at times this season, they probably have been the second best team in the league, and with that, then deserve to go up as second place. Bolton, just for the pure bitterness, the fact that Barnsley did play them in the playoff semi-final last season. I think it'd be great if we met in the final and we beat them again. If we got there again, I have to keep adding that if we got there. So that'd be nice. But I do think Derby. I think Derby will not drop out. I think they'll stay in second place till the end of the season.
Fantastic. We'll work our way down the division and to the playoff chasing teams. Oxford on 70 points, Lincoln 68. We've sort of ruled out Blackpool and Stevenage, haven't we? They're both 6 points off the playoffs. And I think expecting Lincoln and Oxford to both lose 2 games would be just a bit naive. And the goal difference is in favour of especially Lincoln, but also Oxford. So I think you can probably just about rule Blackpool and Stevenage out, which leaves us with Oxford and Lincoln. They play each other on, I believe it's the 16th, the Tuesday following this weekend's games. So Oxford in their running, they've got Peterborough and then Lincoln, and then Stevenage and Exeter to round out the season. And Michael Scabala's team, they've got Wigan this Saturday, and then Oxford, and then they finish off the season with a trip to Cheltenham and a home game against what I would pick as the champions already by this point, which is Portsmouth.
So they're going to be the guard of honour then at the LNER.
Yeah, but I think the reason I bring that up is I think that game then turns from playing a team needing to win the league, it becomes a team that's in party mode. If you get what I'm trying to,
I get what I mean.
Come into.
Again, another cliche. They're on the beach already,
Yeah. Like we've seen with Chesterfield down in the National League, they've sort of turned. Now they've won the league. It's not foot off the gas, but it's just natural, isn't it? You've not got anything to fight for anymore because you've done what you set out to accomplish. So I look at that as an easier run in for Lincoln. But obviously, it all boils down to the game they play each other, doesn't it? It's
absolutely
at Oxford's ground. That I think that decides the playoffs. Whoever wins that, you'd assume, would take that 6th place. But Seb, are you going to book the trend?
Yeah. Well, it's a big game, isn't it, that one?
Very much so. It's a difficult one to pick, isn't it?
It is.
It is a difficult one. I'll go first, shall I? I'll let you have a moment to stew over all the information I've just thrown at you. And I will say, I think Lincoln will get the playoffs. I feel like I have to say that as someone who's reporting on them, that I want I want to report on the playoffs and hopefully a playoff final. So maybe it's the head over the heart. Sorry, over the head.
How do you? Well, how do you think they'll play against Oxford?
I think that's the key game. I think I look at it. Maybe Lincoln are going to beat Wigan at the weekend, which puts them then back into sort of the perfect momentum after that. A minor blip, obviously the draw, and Oxford. This is so many little predictions. I'm sort of flying everywhere. That Peterborough, I think they might struggle a little bit in midway. I'm not going to say they're going to lose, but it could be a bit of a tricky one. And then maybe they'll come back all guns blazing to play Oxford on the Saturday. So I think just looking at that, of those two teams going in, of how I think they're going to go into that game. Obviously, there's a game before this one that I think Lincoln will be in the better situation, and Lincoln are about as good as way as they are at home. They don't really falter any more away from home than they do on the Sincil Bank turf. So I don't see that being as much as a factor. It's obviously a difficult game, but I just think Lincoln are the better team at the minute. The way Michael Scavala's got them playing. If they turn up, then a Lincoln on form, I think, is a better team than an Oxford on form.
I'm going to sit the fence. I'm going to sit the fence. No, I'm not.
Oh, you
I'm
can't
not.
sit on the fence. You
No, no,
can't
no,
sit
no,
on the
no.
fence.
I'm going to make a bold statement. I'm going to make a
Go
bold
on.
statement. I think the winner of the Oxford United versus Lincoln City game will be the team that clinched that 6th place.
That's not a bold statement. Who's
Yeah.
going to win the game? Go on. I need a.
Well,
I
we'll
need. I
find
need a
out on
guess.
Tuesday, 16th of April. No,
Go on. Give me a punt.
I think it'll be Lincoln. I think it'll be Lincoln.
Ah, there we are. I was
I think
hoping
it'll
you
be
was going to
Lincoln.
go against me. Give us something to fight over between now and the end of the season.
No, I do think it'll be really tough, and it's pretty hard to call now. Never mind in 4 games' time when the season will be over. But I think that game was absolutely massive, and
Yeah.
I think Lincoln will win that game, and then therefore Lincoln will triumph in the 6th place spot.
Yep. Agree with you there. That is one we'll talk about. Obviously, next week we'll look back on the weekend's games and look ahead to that one, which is just a massive, massive game, isn't it? But before we say goodbye for this week, we'll talk about the relegation scrap. And there's a few teams down there. Carlisle have officially been relegated. Now they lost 2-0 to Northampton. It was their first season back in League One since 2013. I'm just laughing at you, saluting. For the audio listeners who won't have seen, you salute to Carlisle being relegated.
It's been. I think it's been in the works for a while, really. I think Carlisle are the worst team in the division, and therefore deserve to be relegated, which is what they have been. So
yeah, just 6 wins all season up to this point. It was their first season in League One since 2013-14, so 10 years. And perhaps it just came too early for them. Got promoted through the playoffs last year. Finished 5th, I believe, last season. And it was a bit of a surprise that they got through the playoffs over Stockport, I think it was. They beat in the final. In Stockport, obviously, you can see how well they've done that this season. In League Two. They're sort of running away with things at the minute. So maybe that's the way I look at it. That it was just a season too early. They didn't have the equipment, the players, just the structure maybe to stay in League One. Do you agree with that?
I get it. Yeah. The thing that got me was I don't know if it's poor on Carlisle's side or on Bradford's side, but was a signing of Harry Lewis in January. That didn't really make any sense. Well, it did make sense because they needed a new goalkeeper, but they needed a new goalkeeper in the summer, I think, when they came up. So it was almost a few months too late, and they were trying to bring in players that they were better. Barnsley went in for Lewis in the summer, but Bradford said no, and then for a lesser fee, they said yes to Carlisle in January. So that was a bit of an odd one. There's definitely some good players in there. Armstrong up top for Carlisle is a quality option as well. Butterworth as well.
Owen Moxon's the miss, isn't he? Obviously left in January to Portsmouth. He was the glue that held that team quite shakily, but held that team together. He was the best player in that team. And
there's no doubt about that. Yeah,
he's obviously been a miss.
They've missed him while he's been gone. Sean Maguire as well, another standout. But yeah, they've definitely missed Moxon, seeing if he's gone. But they've just not got enough wins on board, really. As you said, only 6 all season. Lost 27 games off 42 and minus 36 goal difference. So yeah, Carlisle, I wish them all the best in League Two, and hopefully the League Two podcast will have the joys of chatting about them next year.
That's it, and salute them on their way as well, Seb.
Yeah.
So the teams still fighting to stay in the league. Then Fleetwood in 23rd, they're on 34 points, 6 points from safety. Cheltenham are on 38 points, only 2 points from safety. They have a couple of games in hand, and that will, 2 games in hand on Burton, 1 game in hand on Port Vale. And Burton, then, they are level on points with safety, having played 1 game more than Port Vale and 2 games more than Cheltenham. A little bit confusing down this end of the table. Port Vale are the team just above the drop zone in 20th. They've got 40 points, much like Burton. So what do you make of that sort of situation down there then? It's a messy one. Shall we strike off Fleetwood and say they have been relegated 6 points from safety? They are with 5 games to go for them, but they play Blackpool, Peterborough, Leyton Orient before the end of the season.
I'd agree. Yeah. It's certainly messy. I mean, you mentioned that a couple of times, but it's certainly lots of teams that have some played more than others, some played less than others, some goal difference is better, some were not far from safety, but they're actually there's a few teams sort of spacing it all out. So yeah, I would strike off Fleetwood. Fleetwood currently in 23rd with 34 points played.
Yeah.
I think that's them gone.
Yeah, just one win in their last 11 games for Charlie Adams' team. They lost to Cheltenham just a couple of weeks ago. That was on Good Friday, and that is a big loss, wasn't it? Obviously,
Yeah.
putting them quite a way
Would you
out.
agree? Would you agree? Fleetwood
Yeah,
relegated?
I think Fleetwood have gone. I think 6 points obviously is jump. It's managed. You can get there with 5 games left, but it's more of the fact that there's a couple of teams in the way that maybe if they pick up the same amount of points or even less points, they're still going to stay above them. So I think it's bye to Fleetwood. Cheltenham then. I've
I
been
don't
sort of
know.
saying it's writing on the wall for Cheltenham when they at the start of the season. I was like, well, Cheltenham are going down. There's no Alfie May, but
Well, yeah.
they have 1 game in hand on Port Vale, 2 games in hand on Burton. 2 points they are from safety. Between now and the end of the season, they play Carlisle. That's tomorrow night, actually. Bristol Rovers. Then they play Burton. The same day, Lincoln play Oxford. So that really does scream big day, doesn't it? That one.
Absolutely mega, yeah.
And then after that, their last 3 games of the season, if you can quite hold your breath for this, Lincoln, Peterborough, Stevenage, their last 3 games of the season. So they need to pick up some points in their next 3, imagine, don't they? Carlisle, Bristol Rovers, and Burton. They can pick up points in those 3 games, then maybe it's not as pressured for the last couple where there's really some big teams they're playing.
Yeah, that has not fallen favourably at all for them.
No.
The finals 3. Yeah, only six more games to go, and those are your final 3. Well, yeah, out of the whole division, I think they've got the joint most games to play as well. Well, based on looking at the league table and based on the fact that Cheltenham have got 2 games in hand and only 2 points away from safety, I would have backed Cheltenham, but that was without the prior knowledge of those final 3 games. I think that could. I don't want it to be because Cheltenham have done really well since what's he called took over. He'll come back to me. Since the gaffer took over.
Oh yeah, he's lost. His name's gone out of my head as well.
It'll come back to me. It'll come back. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Darryl Clark.
Darryl Clark, obviously, yes.
Since he took over, I proper admire Darryl Clark. I think what he's been through personally, professionally, and what he's done for Cheltenham as well, it can't go under the radar. But
yeah,
I just based on basically the last 3 games alone, I don't think they'll be able to do it. I don't think they'll be able to do it.
I'm happy to go with you on that one. It's they've got the best chance, haven't they, with those games in hand? That they've got more shots to take between now and the end of the season, but not an easy one. Then the other
Not
2
in
there were Cambridge only 5 points clear of relegation. That is worth mentioning. But Burton and Port Vale level on points. Port Vale played 1 less game. In terms of their run-ins, Burton have got to play Stevenage, Cheltenham, which we mentioned, Reading, and then on the final day, Fleetwood. Port Vale then, on the other hand, they've got Peterborough, Exeter, Wickham, Bolton, and then Cambridge on the final day. So you'd probably say Port Vale's got a harder run-in, but 1 more game in there. Obviously, playing Bolton and Peterborough isn't easy for anybody in the division. It's a difficult one. The way Burton have been playing, they're in such bad form, aren't they? We've mentioned it. I had it written down. 10 games they are without a win. That's not the form of a team that can pick up points when they need them in this little patch. Here, Port Vale, on the other hand, they obviously got a couple of wins back-to-backs. One against Burton, actually, just a few weeks ago. I think Port Vale will stay up, but I think only just.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards agreeing with it. I love Burton as an away day, and I think their rise has been great. But yeah, this season, yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. So I think it will stay as it is with the bottom
Yeah.
four. From bottom up will be Carlisle, Fleetwood, Cheltenham, and then Burton. I think will all stay as they are.
Yeah.
Really, Port Vale,
I think
Port Vale probably do deserve to be relegated given Darren Moore's poor form.
well, that was something else actually before. Just to mention that, I reckon if anyone's gonna stay up, it'll be Cheltenham out of those teams down the bottom, and
Yeah,
then obviously that will drop Port Vale down. Do I think Cheltenham are going to get more points in 6 games than Port Vale will do in their last 5? I don't know. They've got difficult fixtures, both of them, and
yeah.
it's so hard to predict. And I think anyone that sort of says this is what's going to happen, they've either got a magic ball or they're lying. It's
Do you know?
difficult to predict. Go on.
It is. Do you know the absolute irony in the fact that Burton and Port Vale currently sit on on the same points, but Burton in relegation, Port Vale aren't. Do you know the irony and the reason why Port Vale are above above the relegation zone?
There's only like one goal in the goal difference. There's very similar goal
Um,
differences, haven't they?
yeah. Well, basically, it was a win for Port Vale against Burton at the end of March,
Yeah,
which has
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
leapfrogged Port Vale
No, that's a
above Burton.
relegation 6-pointer, as they say.
Absolutely, and that I think that sort of ended their 14-match unbeaten run at the time. So yeah, the irony is that Port Vale leapfrogged Burton, if you like, with the win over the Brewers. So yeah,
Fantastic.
it's very tactical, but I do think it'll stay the same as it is. But it's exciting. There's lots of possibilities. Top two maybe less so, but certainly the playoff running and the bottom four running. There's lots to play for, and it's definitely heating up. We've actually not too long left of the season. I think
No,
there's only well, in terms of like Saturday games, I think there's only
3 Saturdays.
3 Saturdays left. Yeah, so
Yeah,
there's
we're
not that many left.
into the final stretch, and
Yeah,
a few games to look ahead to briefly then, which are taking place tomorrow at time of recording, probably today at the time you're listening to this podcast. But the pick of those for me, I'm sure it's probably the same you're picking out, is Stevenage, Barnsley. A few of the games really not having too much impact. Charlton, Wigan, Bristol Rovers, Reading, Leyton Orient, Exeter, all sort of mid-table clashes. As for the main ones, Stevenage, Barnsley, I'll let you talk about that one, Seb, very
yeah,
briefly before we head off. But that's a big game, isn't it, really?
yeah,
Especially for
massive game.
Barnsley.
Yeah, Barnsley need to pick up their sort of form again. They'll be happy that they're doing it from away from home. Another game as well that I'm not quite sure. I seem to have blipped out there for a second, but the local derby between Blackpool and Fleetwood as well.
Yeah, that was the next one
that's
to
happening
talk
Tuesday
about.
night.
Yeah, that is, again, another big game. Blackpool can sort of keep themselves in the hunt for playoffs a little bit, but the main point of that game is sort of Fleetwood trying to stay in the division, isn't it? And if they do win that game, they'll go 3 points behind Burton and have played the same amount of games. So it does put them back in the hunt after we ruled them out just moments ago on the podcast. But a local derby, you never quite know what's going to happen, do you? That'll
Absolutely
be
not.
a
Yeah,
big game for sure over on the Irish Sea, isn't it? Over that way with Blackpool and Fleetwood. I had to
yeah.
think momentarily.
Geography not
But
my
that
strength. I'm glad it was on you.
Yeah, definitely. That will do us then for this week's review episode of the League One podcast here on the lower league. Look, before we go, Seb, where can the good people, the listeners, the viewers, where can they find you on Twitter or X,
They
as we should call it?
they can find me on X, formerly Twitter. Yeah, at Seb letter E Jones. So Seb E Jones on Twitter or X. What about yourself, Jamie?
Mine is the letter J, Johnson _16. If you want more mainly Lincoln content, really, is the sort of the playoffs heat up now, coming towards the end of the season. We will be back same time, same place next week for another episode of the review podcast. If you want some more content,
we need to do the Carlisle salute when we finish.
If you want some more content in between, the Thursday podcast is the place for you, Callum and Sam. They will look ahead.
They're not part timers like we are.
They aren't part timers. They work hard. They work full time.
Absolutely.
unlike us Yorkshire lads having a nice Easter break.
Absolutely. Well deserved, though. Well deserved. Good to be back. Good to be back.
Definitely. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And what is it, Seb? Goodbye to
Sure.
Carlisle and goodbye, everyone.